Throughout Canada's history, there have been turning points when the world's fortunes have been in the balance. And each time, Canada has chosen to step up, to lead on the path of democracy and freedom. We're once again at one of those moments. If we want the world of tomorrow to be shaped by our values, Canada must be ready. If we want a more secure world, we need a stronger Canada that works with our allies. And today is a very important step to build both.
Mark Carney, Canadian Prime Minister, at the NATO meetings in The Hague today with the big announcement earlier in the day that Canada will hit that 5% target, which all 32 NATO members, by the way, say they will meet by 2035. Jim Mennie's on the line over at the Montreal Gazette. So, Jim, what'd you make of what we heard today? You know, this had been the discussion, Jim, 2 weeks ago when we got to 2% or whatever it was, and suddenly we're at 5%.
We're at 5%, and I have to tell you, over the course of his press conference today, he explained in mind-numbing detail exactly how that is going to work. He also, and I want to point out to our listeners, and I want to thank Brian Calasar for having chopped that down. Apparently, the CRTC, we are not allowed to play any longer clips than that of Mark Carney if our listeners are driving or operating heavy machinery, because the fact is, listen. Trudeau, and you and I would roll our eyes over this. Trudeau would have these breathless, never-ending dissertations that masqueraded as an answer to a question and absolutely went nowhere. Carney is, to a certain extent, the diametric opposite of that. If you listen to his answers, which go on for several decades, you will discover that he answers everything. Chapter and verse, right down. And I got to tell you, Aaron, is a blast from the past. The only other guy I ever covered who answered questions this way, he's no longer in politics as far as I know, Richard Bergeron, who was a co-founder of Projet Montréal back in the day. And he would even say, he would look at reporters and say, yeah, that's right, you've just set me off. We're going to be good for another 15 minutes. He would explain everything in great detail, which is great. But in this crazy world, Aaron, it is kind of daunting. But all that said, it seems to be working. Mark Carney is enjoying a very, very high approval rating at this point. He's at 52% according to Abacus data, and people think that everything is just Jake. Interesting, with all the stuff we discussed on the show, the number one priority for voters apparently is not necessarily the economy, which I think came in at number 3. It's the high cost of living. It is inflation, which, of course, this government can only do so much about. But it's interesting to see even now, and we've noticed this phenomenon earlier, that he does, Mr. Carney does follow up on what he says he's going to do. And as for the 5%, listen, I think everybody at that NATO meeting sort of got together before Trump showed up and said, this is the plan. And the plan is you tell Trump exactly what he wants to hear. Will it be 5%? Will there be, these sort of accounting gymnastics on the part of all the NATO membership to make it look as if they're going to be spending 5%? They know they have to increase their spending because they know that the word and the alliance and the trustworthiness of the United States of America is useless. There is no U.S. member of NATO anymore. They are a potential threat. They are a liability. So they know now. They've been forced by Trump to face that reality, and that, to a certain extent, is why we see, for the first time, really, in my God, maybe since the Second World War, we've got a Canadian Prime Minister who is actually pushing through increases in defense spending. So we'll see how that goes. Will it be 5%? Will it be 4%? Given the current state of affairs, anything is better than the status quo. But it will be interesting to see if he can indeed follow through on this, and if indeed the Canadian taxpaying public will look at this as a wise investment down the road. Right now, everyone's got elbows up. Everyone's got their temper up here over what's going on with our neighbors to the south. But the fact is, we'll be having the same conversation in 6 months' time. We'll see. But we also know that there are so many other issues here, so many other pledges that this government has made that have to be followed through on. And I think the number one expectation for the electorate is going to be this famous energy corridor, this famous idea of, you know what, it's time we started making money off of our resources. Let's see where it goes. They're already promising a rough ride for C5, which hastens the approval project for the approval process for major infrastructure projects in the Senate. We'll see how that's going to play out. But it seems so far so good for Mark Carney. Just don't ask him any questions that involve more than yes or no, because you're going to be there for a while.
I don't think there are any of those. By the way, I couldn't help but think, I don't know if we mentioned this last week. So, part of the play here, some people might think, well, we're going to reassess our commitment in 2029, which, happens to coincide with Donald Trump no longer being the president. Yeah. His term would be over. And a lot of people suggested that you can promise whatever you want, right, just to appease the president now, but then come 2029, those promises or pledges pretty much are off the board if you want them to be. That question, by the way, Jim, I don't know if you heard this, was asked of Mark Carney today. I want you to hear his answer.
Did you pick the 2029 review because Donald Trump will be out of office?
Will he be out of office? Oh.
In January,
I didn't realize that. Okay. Look, it's a natural time to review. We'll have enough information at that point.
All right. Jim, did you buy that, by the way?
Listen, you kind of because the whole idea that he wants to form a dynasty, or he wants to get his kids to run in his place, or he figures, the hell with it, I'll just look for another term and another term and another term. I think the other less laughable, more grim realization is Donald Trump is a symptom. Donald Trump did not seize power. Donald Trump was democratically elected, and I think this country, and of course the NATO alliance, I think the rest of the world has to realize Donald Trump is not unique. It's only a matter of time till the Americans elect yet another incompetent lunatic to be their president, and God knows what's going to happen then. So the less we have to do with what is increasingly appearing to be an utterly dysfunctional country, I think the better we're better off we're going to be. So yes, by all means, be diplomatic. Don't poke the chandelier swinging lunatic. But in the meantime, look to the future as something that does not include the U.S. and certainly the way that we had so enmeshed our economic DNA with that of the U.S. I think to a certain extent that's going to be healthy anyway. But I think as long as Donald Trump is around, people at least publicly will be choosing their words carefully, and we'll see. I still said, even before he was elected, that if he was elected, he probably would not finish out his term. I still feel that Trump will be gone before the end of his term, one way or another. The other question is, though, do we get JD events? What's happening? What's going to happen next? We don't know. But that's the trick. Don't rely on the Americans for anything whatsoever.
Well, I take heart in the fact that, Jim, I think this was yesterday, he answered a question and actually sort of acknowledged, whoever's next, implying he's not going to be here after this current term ends. So maybe there's something to be taken from that. But
he's been losing it for the past 3 days, and all of this, the bombing, the reaction to the apparent violations of the ceasefire. He wanted more than anything to get a genuine nomination for a Nobel Peace Prize. Yeah. He's not going to get it, and he is very, very, very disappointed.
I'm so sorry. Meanwhile, closer to home, Francois Legault and the government, of course, which, as you say, pioneered record deficits, does not like talking about them as far as education and school administrators go.
No, in fact, the word has come down that, yes, you eat at least $500 million in cuts, and the unions are saying there's probably going to be more. But all that said, no, you can't run any deficits. You've got to stay within the budget, which is, like I say, it's extremely rich. Hypocrisy, in fact, is a major ingredient in the recipe for politics, certainly politics in Quebec. But all that said, for this government to turn around and say you have to stay within budget after they have, I'm trying to use a verb that I can say on the radio, after they have shoveled all that money away, whether it's on electric vehicles, whether it's on, trying to support various fleurons, not just this government, but even governments before it, the way Quebec just throws money out the window and then has the temerity to turn around and tell the one government agency that is responsible literally for ensuring our future, for educating young Quebecers, to say, you know what, we're cutting your budget and don't go over budget because there'll be a big problem.
Or else,
it takes the cake. And really, it really gives the indication of a government that I think has come to terms with the fact it's going to be blown off the face of the map. So in other words, between now and then, we'll just do whatever the hell we want.
James Mennie at the Montreal Gazette. Thank you, Jim.
The Matt.